Okay, this time I'm going to talk about Chaotica as a teaching tool. I have used Chaotica to teach English as a second language, Spanish too a little bit, but mostly English. As a teaching tool, Chaotica is really, I think, ideal. I've really kind of honed it down a bit and worked out some of the problems. One of the best things about Chaotica as a teaching tool is that education is entertainment. I have a quote here that I've already put up. Anyone who tries to make a distinction between education and entertainment doesn't know the first thing about either. And that's really the nature of education, if you think about it, is you have to feel something to learn. The worst thing for learning is boredom. Traditionally in schools, education is through the emotion of fear. You are afraid of punishment, afraid of getting a bad score on your test. You're afraid of failure, and you're intimidated by a teacher who, or parents or whatever, that are saying, oh, bad things will happen to you if you get bad grades in school. Traditionally, fear is the emotion of learning. I suppose that's true in nature too, because you're afraid of being out at night under the moonlight when the wolves hunt. You learn not to do that, and people who are not afraid go right ahead and do that, and they get eaten by wolves. It's a kind of basic example. But yes, you need emotions to learn. And fear works, pain works. In fact, you might argue pain is the most basic teacher. It's what you learn as a child, not to put your hand on the stove and things like that. Neither of those are pleasant emotions. We do not want to learn with fear. We do not want to learn with pain. If we can learn without experiencing fear or pain, then that is something we want. I think that should be fairly universal. So, education as entertainment is ideal. If you think about it, how hard is it to memorize long lists of medical terms and long, detailed procedures for businesses and things like that? These are not inherently fun things. Learning a new language is really complicated because it's an entire new language. You can do these things, you can learn these things when you are being entertained far more than if you just have to force yourself to do them. As adults, we can force ourselves to learn things we don't want to, but it is so much better to associate them with pleasant emotions. It's much easier to remember things, like if you watch a movie that is meant to entertain you, you will remember things in that movie far better than watching a 2-hour presentation on how to electrofish or something. Some people just find those things naturally fascinating and can go ahead and just learn them quickly. The rest of us don't. And if you can learn something through a storytelling format, then that you help to create together with the other students, that you collaborate, you build, you participate with it, and it's building a story that you find interesting and engaging. Yes, storytelling and entertainment that's part of how the human psyche learns things. We remember things in stories more easily than just having someone lecture to us. And the lecture works. That's why college courses have lectures. It's not ideal, and it often incites boredom, which is bad for learning. So education and entertainment go hand in hand. Chaotica in particular is ideal for language because ultimately it is a listening and speaking exercise. You have the narrator describing a scene. The players decide how they will respond to the scene. It naturally invokes the same kinds of activities you need to use when using a language. For listening and speaking, obviously, there's that. But you also have basic things like introducing yourself. You have your character, meets other characters. You introduce yourself. Not yourself, you're introducing your character in this case, but practicing the same function of introducing yourself. Navigation, deciding where to go. These are things you communicate with other people. Should we go north? Should we go south? Should we take this path? Should we sneak around this house to the right? Things like that. Those are part of navigating an environment where you use language in an environment. And roleplay makes this something that most roleplay in language classes is just reading two different parts in a book And it's not role play, it's just repeating what other people give you. Real role play is where you create a role in a setting that has motivations, has purpose, has drive, and ultimately tells a story. And that's what Chaotica is all about. And so it's ideal for teaching language because it is all the basic things that you use a language to do. Language is a tool, and you use it to do these kinds of things, like introducing yourself, negotiating, navigating, working around whatever you're doing in the world around you, interacting with an environment. And ultimately, that is what we want to do when we want to learn a new language. So, the other thing that Chaotica does more clearly is activity-based learning. It's difficult to use Chaotica to learn things that are information-based. If you want to have, say, a history course, and you want to learn the things that happened, well, in any particular period of history, Chaotica doesn't do that very well. Because how do you create your own story in a setting that transfers that information to you? You're creating a fictional setting. You can try to do it through historical fiction or something like that. But the real question, I guess I would ask, is what is the purpose of teaching a purely informational course? History course, for instance. In the end, I think any course you want to take should be to teach you new skills. You should be able to say at the beginning and end of any given course, okay, these are the skills I want to have. These are the things I want to be able to do that I can't currently do. And by the end of the course, you should be able to say, I can now do these things that I couldn't do at the beginning of the course. So it's very much activity-based learning, where you are trying to do and learn how to do certain things that you couldn't do before. And of course, you use Chaotica and the storytelling it involves to create the circumstances where you need to do those things. And just like a video game, you slowly increase the difficulty until you learn to do what you could not do before. And obviously that requires starting at a certain basic level. You need to have, if you're learning English, you need to have a certain basic level of English in order to function at all in the game. Though there's ways to work your way up as well. But getting that certain basic functional level of English isn't that difficult, and it keeps things small at first as you can slowly progress. There's other things like, say, learning math. You can integrate math into the magic systems where you have to solve equations, for instance, to prepare spells. You can make it so that math is part of a dream sequence thing where you use equations in order to function in kind of a dream-type world, and integrate that into the rest of the story. And in fact, that is one of the things that's nice about Chaotica, is it involves a very holistic learning style. Ideally, you could use the Chaotica story engine to combine many different subjects and teach them all together. You integrate all these different subjects, all these different skills into a single story, and they're all part of the curriculum. And as part of the curriculum, these are things that you are scheduled to encounter as the chapters progress and as the stories progress, and hopefully as your skills progress as well. One of the things that you can also do in Chaotica is, traditionally in tabletop games like Dungeons & Dragons, which this is often compared to, even though it doesn't have that much in common, you have you determine success or failure with a dice roll. Or I use random numbers on the spreadsheet, so I have a list of those I can call on. Many DMs use pre-rolled dice. It's the same idea. But one of the alternatives is using personal, physical, intellectual activities to represent your character. Now, of course, your character might be much smarter than you, and you adjust that. So you did this well on this task, and your character is however much better than you at this, so you would assume that they did that much better or that much worse, depending on the character we're talking about. But in your case, you as a student, as a player, have your abilities, and you kind of scale those with the abilities of your character. If they're supposed to be the same, then you don't need to change anything. If your character is much stronger than you, then you can say that, okay, the number of push-ups you did was doubled because of what the character did. And that's where it makes kind of this holistic learning, because you can combine physical and intellectual activities, where there are things to practice the same basic kind of abilities that you have in Dungeons and Dragons. You would use the same thing in Chaotica. Chaotica doesn't focus on those abilities and ability scores the way D&D does, but if you're trying to aim for holistic education, there's no reason you can't have a little bit of everything. So the holistic nature of the Chaotica game engine allows it to use these different properties like strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, like they classically do in D&D, and replace them with whatever skills you want to use in your course, in the class you are teaching. So you can combine a variety of different courses, including physical education, into one big storytelling activity that combines all of the target skills you want for the variety of curriculums. So instead of saying, okay, here's your math class, here's your physical education class, here's your logic or what other other courses you would normally have to teach all the skills you want to teach, you can combine them together into one big storytelling activity if you want to. I think that to test this out, it would probably make sense to try it just to use the proof of concept just for English or Spanish classes, but it has much more potential than just that. And so that is the use of Chaotica as a teaching tool, and I think that it is a very powerful tool, one that could be used especially for online classes. You can use it through any medium that lets you talk to people, Google Meets, Zoom, Discord, anything that lets you talk with people, you can do this. Of course, if you want to do a fully holistic curriculum where you combine all these different goals together, that should probably be face-to-face, and the teacher can use a laptop or whatever else to manage the spreadsheet and the other, all the inputs, the data, the outcome, the result of each student's attempt to perform the different activities, and things like that. So that there's lots of interesting options there, and that is the overview of how you use the Chaotica engine as a teaching tool. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Questions and comments are welcome in the comments, so I look forward to interacting with you and finding out how you would like to use this tool and any schools that you have available. I am interested in making contacts and getting started and showing you how this can be a very powerful teaching tool. Thank you.